How you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Today on Friday, October 18th, to close out the week, talk about the start of Week 7 that started off last night with the Broncos taking on the New Orleans Saints. We're going to have that on the menu for you guys today to talk about. Also, we're going to get to the second part of the game picks that we left off of yesterday. Also, in today's show, we got Troy Aikman talking about the Cowboys even on their bye week and really dunking all over them and their efforts so far through the year. We're going to get to that and much more on today's show, so make sure to stick around. And also, before we get started, if you guys want to get involved with the show, give out any opinions, share any questions, or just any comments you'd like to make, please don't hesitate to do that. We always want to hear your input and insight on anything we talk about during these live shows. And now, if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and it gets featured on this show, there's an easy way to do that now. Just by using the new Super Chat feature available to you guys. You guys can just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. This way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a great way to just support our channel, and we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content that you love, and we appreciate every time you guys are able to do that for us. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking, hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as conversational as always. Here to round out the week on a Friday. There's a lot of good stuff to talk about today, so please don't hesitate to share your opinion. But with that now out of the way, we can talk about what we saw last night, because it was a game between the Denver Broncos and the New Orleans Saints. Not necessarily the most exciting must-watch team so far, but the story was Sean Payton returned to New Orleans last night, the same night that Drew Brees, his former quarterback in New Orleans, was inducted into the Saints Ring of Honor, and Sean Payton and his new team walked right in there and ruined everything for the Saints and this celebration. The Broncos won pretty convincingly, 33-10, to take them now to 4-3 on the year, and the Saints unfortunately lose their fifth game in a row, and now ever since starting 2-0, obviously, now they're sitting at 2-5, and just like we had discussed, just like we had thought of in the preview, the Broncos defense was, going to make this offense for the Saints really uncomfortable. I think last week with the Buccaneers, they had them stick around a little bit. Spencer Rattler looked great. The offense put up 27 points, and for a moment there, you thought, Spencer Rattler's doing pretty well. Like, could he actually win this game? But of course, the Buccaneers pulled away, and now in this game, they never really had a chance to give up the game or even really be considered to be in the game, because right from the start, the Broncos, looked like they were just on a different mindset, where it looked like they were a bit more focused. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, what kind of plays would have worked against the Saints defense, and they just looked a little bit better. I guess prepared would be the most accurate word in this game. They were up for the challenge a lot more than I felt the Saints were. I felt the Saints came out a little bit flat with a couple punts to start off the game. And even though the Broncos only put up field goals to start, still, it was something that they piled on surely as the game went on. But, with this game overall, I thought the injuries were a big thing, obviously, for the Saints, right? With the fact that there was no Olave, no Rashid Shaheed. Also, the offensive line was all out of whack as well. They had a bunch of new guys playing. And with Sean Payton coming in, him being extra motivated to come back and win in his former home, all of that really just didn't have me uber positive about the Saints and their chances in this game. But I thought the Broncos, still to their credit, surprised me with how their offense looked as well. I thought it would be a lot closer. I thought it would be a bit more of a low-scoring game for both of these teams. I guess it was for the Saints. But the Broncos, I didn't expect them to put up maybe any more than 24 points, but they scored 9 more points than that. And, the Broncos outgained the Saints in this game, actually, 389 to 271, which is very impressive overall, right? But also, while that is great for the Broncos, right, with a new young rookie quarterback and whatnot, still, how much of that is on the Saints, right? How much of the blame should they get on this loss because of the fact that they just aren't a good team potentially? And I feel tricked by the Saints. I really do. I feel like they've misled a lot of us. And after 2 weeks, right, everything's good. Everyone's overreacting. The good vibes are everywhere. They're just beating the heck out of the Cowboys. Everyone's praising them, right? But then after that, it kind of fell flat. There were some more injuries, and everyone's dealing with injuries, right? But it just felt like the Saints, I don't know, like lost that mystique on offense. And of course the injuries are huge when you don't really have an extra amount of playmakers out there, outside of Olave and Shaheed, right, and Kamara that was playing out of his mind. It's pretty thin, right? It's not like you have a couple more guys coming in that are just going to pick up the slack with those guys missing, and I think that was pretty evident in last night's game. And getting to some of the better performances in this game, Bo Nix had a clean game. He was 16 of 26 with 164 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, wasn't sacked either in this game. Javonte Williams had a solid game, 88 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 14 carries. Bo Nix also added 75 yards as well. So really taking advantage of his athleticism against the Saints team that is finding it really hard to stop almost anybody. And this, again, wasn't a good look for them. Troy Franklin had a decent game. No passing touchdowns, obviously, but Troy Franklin led all of the receivers with 5 receptions and 50 yards in this game. And on the Saints side, Spencer Rattler had a better debut game against the Buccaneers, but in this one, it was very just underwhelming, I guess. 25 of 35, 172 yards. He was sacked 6 times in this game, so it really just wasn't all on him, more so on just the entire offense. But the running game basically wasn't there. Kamara had 7 carries for 10 yards. Kendre Miller was the leading rusher with 36 yards, so very, very bad day there. And Cedric Wilson, he scored the only touchdown, but he only had 57 yards and 6 receptions, so yeah, it pretty much said a lot about how the game went for the Saints if you didn't decide to tune in, right? If you just decided to skip this week. But it kind of started like as an interesting game because the Broncos were only kicking field goals, and even though the disparity in the start of the game was pretty big, the Saints ran 22 plays in the first half, and the Denver Broncos ran almost double that at 43 plays in the first half. But it was 16-3 at halftime, and like I said, there was maybe all 4 or 3 of the field goals that the Broncos kicked came in the first half, basically. So it never really felt too bad. Like, you saw them play, you saw the Saints were really struggling, but with the score like that, you're thinking, maybe something could happen in the second half. But it was more of the same, really. Or if anything, the Broncos kind of found their groove a little bit more. And once the second half started, Javonte Williams scored his second touchdown, and it never really clicked yet there for the Saints. Spencer Rattler lost 2 fumbles as well, not really helping his case out too much in his second game of his young career. So he didn't play that great. The offensive line didn't do him any favors. Also, they were abysmal, and it's hard to get your playmakers the ball. Kamara didn't have a great game and everything like that. So the Saints were actually held to 3 points basically the entire game up until 1 minute and 22 seconds left. And I think it was the third quarterback coming in now at this point and throwing a touchdown to Cedric Wilson. So that really didn't matter. And in this game, just Bo Nix did his job, and the Saints offense really, I mentioned they kind of misled us, but they really dropped the ball in this game just because last week with Spencer Rattler, I kind of expected this sort of game out of them last week, and they really went out there for what it's worth. The young rookie ignorance, or the being just so naive that you just go out there and you're not really thinking about it. But this week, certainly, it looked like they were out of their league, and we're not talking about major contenders here per se. The Broncos are good, but they're not that good also. And I'd like to give them a bit more credit, but The injuries are huge to the Saints, and I don't want to just jump over that, but this defense for the Saints is really worrying. They were supposed to hold their own this year. I think that was a bit more of a safer bet this year for the Saints, that they still had DeMario Davis, Cam Jordan, Chase Young came over, Tyrann Matthews on that side, Marshawn Lattimore. But they haven't really been good, in terms of allowing points. Since week 4, they've given up 26 points to the Falcons, 26 points to the Chiefs, 51 points to the Buccaneers last week, and now 33 to a Broncos team that's not so prolific on offense. And more numbers on their defense are 146 rushing yards allowed per game is 28th in the NFL. They've allowed 248 passing yards per game, which is also 28th in the NFL. And they're allowing the most total yards per game, nearly averaging 400 yards allowed per game is this defense. And it's just not good enough, especially for a head coach that was the defensive coordinator for Sean Payton, and now your defense is really what's holding you back. It's not lining up, and it's not a good look for the whole entirety of the Saints, but also Dennis Allen. And I guess just lastly here on Denver, I've been critical of the Broncos for even selecting Bo Nix, but slowly I'm starting to believe more in this defense. Right now, I think they're tied with the Giants, if not in first place now in the number of sacks that they have. So that's such an unbelievably underrated weapon that teams have that really makes a difference. And their offense, it's getting there. They definitely need more pieces. Courtland Sutton, I don't know if he didn't play last night or if Marshawn Lattimore was just clamping him up. But, the receivers did all right. Again, I just trashed the Saints defense. So they were going up against that defense. But I feel like with the Broncos, what I was left with was the fact that, they're going to be all right going forward. I feel like Bo is slowly convincing me a little bit more. And with Sean, with his expertise and the pieces that they're putting around him with a great defense, I think they're going to be all right a lot sooner than definitely what I thought, and I think than a lot of people think as well. So, yeah, very good game for the Broncos, but also very disappointing for the New Orleans Saints. They could potentially get Derek Carr back, though, next week, so we'll keep an eye on that. But speaking of quarterbacks, mentioning quarterbacks there like Derek Carr, we're going to get to a former quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys in Troy Aikman. He appeared on a podcast or a radio show over the last couple days and had a lot to say about the Cowboys offense, specifically their wide receivers, and how they could be a reason why this passing game and the offense in general has been so lackluster and underwhelming. We're going to get into what Troy Aikman said. He said a lot and he didn't hold anything back, so we'll get back to that after this next break. You're listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.